Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend, and she is unquestionably honourable, said that we would leave the customs union. Annex 2 says otherwise. My right honourable friend said that she would maintain the integrity of the United Kingdom. A whole protocol says otherwise. My right honourable friend said that we would be out of the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. Article 174 says otherwise. As what my right honourable friend says and what my right honourable friend does no longer match, should I not write to my right honourable friend, the member for Altrincham and Sale West?
I'm just going to bring in Jacob Rees-Mogg, who has joined us here. What is your message to Cabinet Ministers going in to read that document this evening, this draft text? What would you be looking for if you were in that room?
Well, if what we've heard is true, this fails to meet the Conservative Party's manifesto, and it fails to meet many of the commitments that the Prime Minister makes. It would keep us in the customs union and de facto in the single market. This is the vassal state. It is a failure of the government's negotiating position. It is a failure to deliver on Brexit, and it is potentially dividing up the United Kingdom. It is very hard to see any reason why the Cabinet should support Northern Ireland being ruled from Dublin.
And is it in your view that Cabinet Ministers who don't agree should tell her tonight and walk away from the Cabinet table?
They should say that they do not agree with it if the text that has been leaked is correct. Interestingly, a text on the future of the United Kingdom is given to the Irish television station first, and not to the British Broadcasting Corporation. That seems to me rather peculiar, that we don't even get told our own future first. It gets given out abroad. I think that's discourteous to the nation.
Theresa May would say, I'm sure, that these have been difficult negotiations. It was always going to be a compromise, and no side is going to get exactly what they want, and you will not get exactly what you want.
Theresa May has said many things. She said that Brexit would mean Brexit. She said that no deal was better than a bad deal. And she said that no Prime Minister would agree to separating Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom. Sometimes what she says and what she does do not match.
So what do you think she should do now? You think that no deal is now, what, the most likely option?
I think she should stick to her promises and her manifesto commitments and her various speeches, which what we've heard of this agreement fails to do. I think trust in politics is very important. It's important the country can trust the Prime Minister. And if this document turns out to be accurate, then it will be very difficult to trust anything that comes out of Downing Street.
But some would say that once that general election result meant that she lost her majority, it was a general election which was about Brexit, that meant that this was always going to be a much more difficult compromise than it would have been if she'd had a resounding victory.
The Prime Minister said only a few weeks ago, long after the election result, that she would not do anything that separated Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom. It's not since the election that things have changed. It is actually very recently in post-Chequers that we have found a complete change in the government's approach, and basically the white flags have gone up all over Whitehall.
And there are some who say that Northern Ireland already has slightly different regulatory checks. They already have a different relationship with Ireland, for example, than the rest of the United Kingdom has. Could they not accept some differences if they were small ones?
No, these differences have been agreed between us as a nation. There are some differences in the devolved settlements in Scotland and in Wales as well. These are not a question of a foreign organisation telling us what the relationship should be between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And the issue here is that some aspects of the single market may apply in Northern Ireland, and these will be more controlled by Dublin than they will be by Belfast. This is quite improper to allow Dublin to make the rules in Northern Ireland. It's a betrayal of the Union.
So what kind of arrangement would you have liked to see her negotiate? People have talked about Canada Plus, which wouldn't necessarily solve the issue of no border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. There are lots of competing issues here, which is why we've ended up where we have.
That's right, but it is really bizarre to have got into a situation with the customs union where, as a full member of the European Union, we had a very straightforward mechanism for leaving the customs union, the exercise of Article 50. Now it appears that we will have to get the permission of the European Union to leave the customs union. This is a very eccentric way to negotiate. It is a very weak way to negotiate. Yes, indeed, free trade is what I would be in favour of, and if you want to call that Canada Plus or Super Canada, that I think is a good way of phrasing it.
Do you agree with Boris Johnson that the deal as it looked, or the draft agreement as it looked, would actually mean that it would be better to stay in the EU because it would at least have some control over the rules.
Well, as it happens, I can hear the great man's dulcet tones just about 3 yards away from us with a competitor station, and you can probably ask him in a moment. But I think what the government is currently negotiating is not delivering on the referendum result to leave the European Union. I think remaining in the European Union is off the cards, because that would be abandoning a democratic vote, reinforced by a general election where both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party said that the result of the referendum would be respected, and the Lib Dems, who wanted to overturn it, saw their vote share decline.
Do you agree with some in the Cabinet who have said actually that leaving the EU is the most important thing? Come March, we have to leave and we can sort out our future relationship and other things at that point.
The backstop doesn't allow us to leave the customs union without the permission of the European Union. So it's a lesser ability to leave under these arrangements than we currently have. That doesn't seem to me to be wise or to meet the requirements of what you're suggesting, of leave in any form and then settle the details.
So, what do you think happens next?
Well, I hope the Cabinet will block it, and if not, I hope Parliament will block it. I think what we know of this deal is deeply unsatisfactory.
And is it your feeling amongst your colleagues that there are enough of them there to block a deal if it's in these terms that we think it might be, and we must stress these are only leaks?
That's right, they're only leaks given to the Irish broadcaster, as I had mentioned before. There seems to be a lot and growing opposition to these very poor proposals.
Okay, Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you very much indeed. And we're just going to speak now to the former Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson.
Nice
I'm very well, thank you. We're live on BBC News. Thank you for speaking to us.
Fine,
we are only at the stage where we're seeing leaks of documents.
That's right, and so we have to be pretty careful. But this has been well trailed. This has been a chronicle of a death foretold for some months now, and I think effectively it's pretty much what Ollie Robbins and Sabine Vaughan agreed a few weeks back anyway. We're going to stay in the customs union on this deal. We're going to stay effectively in large parts of the single market, and that means it's vassal state stuff. We are going to, for the first time in 1,000 years, this Parliament will not have a say over the laws that govern this country. It is a quite incredible state of affairs. It will mean that we are having to accept rules and regulations from Brussels over which we have no say ourselves. It is utterly unacceptable to anybody who believes in democracy. It is not the right way forward. And there is a kicker. And the kicker is that not only are we going to remain in the customs union and in large parts of the single market, but also we will not have protected our precious union. Because if you look at what they've agreed today, again we must caveat this and say you look at the reports, then it is also accepted that there must be customs and regulatory checks down the Irish Sea between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which currently do not exist. And for the first time since partition, Dublin, under these proposals, would have more say in some aspects of the government of Northern Ireland than London. So I don't see how you can support it from a democratic point of view. I don't see how a unionist can support it, and I don't see how you can support it if you believe in the political and economic freedom of this country. So if you ask my question, am I going to vote against it? The answer is yes.
Yeah, I think we gathered that. Okay. What about the rest of the Cabinet, your former Cabinet colleagues? What's your message to them?
Well, I hope that they consider it carefully, and that obviously, we'll have to see exactly what it is and have to look at the terms, but it's been extensively trailed. And I think that the right thing for them to do would be to advise the Prime Minister that this would not be acceptable to the House of Commons or to the British people, because it patently fails to fulfil the mandate given by the British people in June 2016. So I think it's time to, and there is bags of time.
But what's the alternative?
The alternative has been well set out by plenty of people in the last couple of years, not least the Prime Minister herself. When at Lancaster House on January the 17th, 2017, she set out a very attractive vision for a free trade deal, a Canada-style free trade deal, coupled with all sorts of other intergovernmental arrangements and partnerships, which I think would be incredibly attractive to the people of this country and to our friends and partners in the European Union. And that's the way forward.
Except people have said that doesn't solve this issue of not having border checks.
I think that as you will have heard people say many times before, I think that the issue of the border in Northern Ireland has been escalated quite deliberately in order to produce this perverse result that the whole of the UK ends up remaining within the customs union and in the single market, thereby effectively frustrating the result of the referendum and the verdict of the people, and basically making a nonsense of Brexit. So I hope the Cabinet will do the right thing, and I hope they chuck it out.
Just one more question. What happens next if Parliament does reject it? Are you relaxed about us going out without a deal?
I don't think anybody on either side of the Channel wants no deal, and I don't think it is remotely necessary. I think, by the way, that the negative consequences of no deal have been exaggerated. I think there would be effects, and they'd have to be dealt with, they'd have to be managed. I'm not going to deny that for a second. Of course that's true. But I don't think it's anything like as bad as people currently pretend. But nobody wants no deal, just as nobody wants a hard border in Northern Ireland. It is possible to fix these problems.
People talk about it being bumpy and there being difficulties and short-term. We're talking about people's jobs and the economy, aren't we?
We have abundant time between now and what's called the end of the implementation period at the end of 2020 to get this right, and we can get it right.
What we should do, drill to get that.
That's right. So what we should do now is scrap the current backstop arrangements in the current withdrawal agreement, and we have time to do that, and then have a withdrawal agreement in which both sides say very simply that they don't want to have a hard border in Northern Ireland. The European Commission joins with that ambition. Nobody wants a hard border in Northern Ireland. You have a withdrawal agreement setting that out, setting out all the other terms that need to be established, and then you go forward over the next couple of years to do the free trade deal. And that's what we should do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Johnson, thank you very much indeed.
Ronald, let's go back to the beginning, shall we? The referendum that took place in June 2016, we, the British people, were asked a question and assured in the government leaflet and elsewhere that whatever our decision, they would abide by it. What was the question? Maybe it's worth tonight just reminding ourselves where this whole thing started. It was, should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union or leave the European Union? Wasn't very difficult, was it? Wasn't very complicated, and, you know, my cross went in that box. I voted to leave, and a majority voted to leave, and we were told it would be implemented. And what we've seen in the last 24 hours is Mrs May signing up to a text, a 500-page text, which hasn't, by the way, yet been fully released, though there are plenty of leaks. And what we do know about this text is that we will stay in a customs union. We will stay with the European rule book, not just the existing rules, but all the new laws they pass as time goes on, but without, of course, having any say whatsoever. What we do know is we'll pay somewhere between 40 and 60 billion pounds for the privilege of them making our laws without us having any say whatsoever. We know that free movement will continue for several years without any change whatsoever. There'll be no change to the common fisheries policy for many, many years. And when it comes in the transition period after March the 29th, which is now an up to 3-year transition period at Theresa May's request, that when it comes to negotiating a future trade deal, written in the small print is that we'll have to abide by European rules until, wait for it, and if you're driving, slow down, 2030. And I wish I was making this up. And yet, when confronted with this reality, in Prime Minister's questions by Peter Bone, the Wellingborough Conservative MP, when he asks her, is this really Brexit? This is her response.
Can I say to my honourable friend that what we have been negotiating is a deal that does deliver on the vote of the British people. In the list that I set out earlier, I left out one of the things that the British people are very keen to see from this deal, which is an end to free movement, and we will ensure that we are delivering on that, as well as those other elements that I have set out. What we're doing is a deal that delivers on that vote, but in doing so protects jobs, protects the integrity of our United Kingdom, and protects the security of people in this country.
When? When will we end free movement? When will we get our fisheries back? When will we be able to make our own laws? Well, it looks like 2030 is now the date that's been decided on for some of it, and why should that change for all the rest of it? I simply cannot believe that we've got a Prime Minister who stands up and says Brexit means Brexit, but what she really means is Brexit means Remain. I'm so angry today I can barely put it in words. I mean, this is the lowest point I've seen in my lifetime in terms of a British government and the trust that it has from the people. It's despicable. And it's not just my side that are angry. She's now being openly mocked by the other side. I mean, how about this from Tony Blair? I mean, it's quite remarkable. He says, I take my hat off to Ollie Robbins. That's the civil servant who's really in charge of Brexit. I take my hat off to Ollie Robbins. Ollie is a very skilled guy. The elaborate camouflage of all the different points is a tribute to the skill of the British civil service. I say that sincerely. Well, I've been arguing for some time that they are the enemy within. And the Evening Standard, of course, edited by George Osborne, the man who was Chancellor of the Exchequer in the referendum, threatened us with an emergency budget. And it's a big front page. Theresa May's head inside the European Union flag. EU takes back control. So she's being mocked from all sides. But a day of great drama. She is stuck, as I understand it, still inside a cabinet meeting. There's a big dispute as to whether she's going to speak to the Commons tonight or do a press conference.